The clock started before we could breathe. I stood beneath the tactical dome, palms braced against its cool graphite rim, while the ultimatum timer burned in the upper corner like a wound that kept perfect time. 19 minutes. 56 seconds hovered in a sober crimson font, pinned to the Accord's open-channel broadcast for every hull in the corridor to see. Our convoy, 17 freighters, 4 hospital barges, 1 ugly fuel brick that wheezed heat sat clenched behind our line of escorts, and the plain face mass of my flagship Calder. The enemy fleets were not many, but they were arranged with a mathematician's malice. A wedge guarding a narrow corridor through the Meridian Gate that had once been a trade lane and now felt like a throat. Their commander, Praetor Talon, loved geometry the way some men love children. "We do not mistake a clock for a verdict, Sextant," I said, and the fleet mind's presence rose like a tide through the room's ear cups and wrist skins, measured and dry as cold air. "Pin the wedge." "3 spear elements, Admiral," Sextant replied, voice genderless and warm with a hum as if thought made a current. "Missile towers on tails, interdiction nets along the corridor. Their carrier riders hold a parallel plane above us. High radiation profile. Their doctrine remains ultimatum first, annihilation second. Recommend we teach before we bleed." Commander June Reyes stood to my right, his breath fogging the inside of his visor before it wicked away. He slept little, drank less, and looked like an equation that refused rounding errors. "Convoy says they can burn for 70 seconds at most," he reported. "The fuel brick is already peaking on heat. Medical barges red anxious. Captain Vale on knife wants to strike out of turn. Knife will wait," I said. The deck vibrated with our shielding's low hymn, a bass that settled in the ribs and would not leave. "Put Vale on tight leash and keep comms open. Idris, paint the corridor edges with banal chatter. I want the Praetor listening to boredom." "Copy," Idris Hall said from the pit, fingers walking the console, his lips shaping the silent practice of lies. The scent of warm metal rolled up as if someone had opened a kiln door. A tiny chime marked another slice off our future 19 minutes. 20 seconds. Talon's face had not yet appeared. Only his stable blue seal, the last offer of order. His doctrine did not waste words. His doctrine claimed mercy by schedule and saw dissent as failed arithmetic. Every deadline is a hand on your shoulder before any major push. I asked for civilian eyes. It was our habit, our ballast. Sextant cycled a frontline feed to my sleeve, and I watched a galley aboard the freighter lifted grain, where steam fogged a hatch, and the cook, in a grease-splattered apron, steadied a pan on a locked gimbal. "We're not closing the kitchen," she said to the camera. Voice even, hair wrapped in a faded scarf. "Eat small now. Eat small later. Heat budget's tight. You take tea if you're shaking. We have lemon peel. No sugar today. If your crew's got a young one, tell them they can come stir when it's safe. Hands need something to do." A child's laugh flicked across the audio, thin as wire. A pair of mechanics in faded jackets sat on stools, shoulders touching because a hull in fear remembers warmth in the background. I heard the stutter of a pump, then a slow return to rhythm. One of the mechanics looked up and said, "If the bad men shout, we shout back." The cook lifted a brow and shook her head. "No, love. If the bad men shout, we set the table steady so the good ones can do their work." She tapped the side of the pan like a promise. "We keep people fed so their courage stays organized." I closed the feed and let the galley's damp heat fade. "Tactician," I said. "What do you see that I don't know?" Lieutenant Sarah Vale's voice came thin and fierce over the intercom, like a blade that had been honed by insomnia. "I see the Wedge's left toe running a microjitter in its emitters. Not malfunction. It's bait. Admiral, they want us to pour force into that soft flank, then collapse the corridor with their interdiction nets. They'll sell the collapse as our choice for ignoring their last offer. Of course they will," I said. "They think the story is theirs to write." Reyes cleared his throat. The sound clipped by the mic suppressor. "What's our lead lesson?" That word tightened the air. Teach first. Fight if forced our motto that made some captain scoff, and most of my crew stand a little straighter when the night watch got long. We had all bled for it in court, in inquiry, in channels where the public appetite ran on spectacle and finding the moment someone flinched. "We teach so we don't have to kill." "Sextant," I said. "Spin the chessboard. Build me a mirror lattice in the corridor. Wide mesh. Low power. Tuned to their sensor returns. I want their emitters to eat themselves. Idris, we're going to echo their own signal grammar back at them with a slight delay and a half-tone dip. Make it feel like bad weather." "Bad weather," Idris repeated with a half-smile. His console's amber washed his face bone-pale. The air carried a faint citrus from a dehumidifier that had seen better days. "I can give you drizzle that wets a man without him noticing." The timer bit another minute. 18 minutes, 2 seconds. The Praetor refused to blink. I opened a channel on a tight beam to his wedge. Voice clipped. Neutral. Taut for recordings. Praetor Talon. "Admiral Maracade of the Concordant Human Convoy Guard. Your ultimatum is received and logged. Public record acknowledges your threat to destroy non-combatant hulls if we continue transit. Our reply is the same as last month, last week, and last night. Civilians will pass. Escorts will shield, and you will be held accountable for any harm you choose to inflict. We will not fire first. We will demonstrate. You cannot claim peace after you aim past children." "Admiral," Sextant murmured across neural, a whisper like electricity against the skin. "Lattice is growing. I am harvesting corridor reflections and ghosting them 3 milliseconds off their outbound rhythm. They'll doubt their own eyes, then correct in the wrong direction. Make it a low hum," I said. The deck shivered as our emitters began singing to themselves. The scent of ionized dust rose like the air before a storm. No sudden edges. Idris raised a hand. Praetor on. Talon's icon dissolved, and his face arrived with the confidence of someone certain history belongs to his hand. He did not look monstrous. He looked like an accountant who loved knives. Behind him, the muted glow of a battle bridge. "Admiral Cade," he said, mouth barely moving. "Your convoy will cut engines. You will vent your warheads. You will accept escort to the holding orbit. Failure to comply is an armed declaration. 17 minutes remain. Choose mercy." "Your schedule is not mercy," I said. "Schedules keep the universe civilized," he said, almost friendly. "Those who refuse the last offer prove themselves feral. Mercy without choice is just a leash." I cut the line and let Sexton keep listening to his breathing. "Jun," I said. "How hot are we?" "High side of nominal," Reyes replied. "The fuel brick is sweating like my uncle at a wedding." "Good. Keep it sweating." "Sarah." Sneak knife 6 microdegrees upplane and broadcast its heat as if it were 3 ships. I want the lattice to lean left and pull their carrier riders with it. "Executing," Vale said. The map updated as if the starfield itself were choosing sides. The hum of the emitters deepened into a slow purr that set teeth on edge. The mirror lattice thin, fragile, and arrogant began weaving the corridor's light into a gently misleading song. Another civilian window opened on my sleeve, unasked and right on time. Sextant knew when to show me people. In a maintenance locker aboard Mercy's Wake, a medic checked the seals on 3 stretcher pods while talking softly to the camera, as if it were a friend who had wandered in. "We have room for 9 severe and 18 moderate," she said. "We prefer none. If you're listening, kid on lifted grain, don't drink tea too fast. Stomach's a drum. We can warm your hands if your mother's busy." A second voice, older and rasping, added, "Our hull sings when she's scared. Put your palm to the wall. She'll tell you what to do." Palms, no cadence. Kindness is a drum we beat before the charge. "Sextant," I said, "show me their rider wing." "Overeager," Sextant said, amusement curling at the edges of thought. The left toe rises to sniff the bait. Interdiction nets remain open, but their timing skew has widened by 9 microseconds. The wedge believes its own math too much. "That's the curse of doctrine," Reyes said, and almost smiled. Sweat gathered at my temple and ran cold as if the ship had decided to breathe for me. "Idris, drag the tail of our chatter," I said. Make us sound clumsy. Talon must believe he's got us afraid of our own mirrors." Copied Tao, dropping articles, adding typos, Idris said, spiking a few nervous laughs. His board chirped as if it were pleased to be a stage. "We make a foe overconfident by letting them count too early." The Praetor's timer kissed 15 minutes. The carrier riders on his high plane adjusted to a phantom knife and bled vectors left, their wakes smearing the EM like finger paint. Sarah's calm rose as the map matched her prediction. "If they commit to the left drift," she said, "we get a throat on the right. That's not a throat. It's a corridor pretending to be a throat," Reyes said. "Exactly. We can turn it right side out. We all knew the lesson, make the beat public. If we punched through, we did it in a language that inquiry boards and schoolrooms could read later. If we failed, the ledger of our choices would still show the arithmetic of restraint." A spatter of static licked my ear as Sextant gave me a private whisper. "Admiral," it said, "their countdown has a second layer. I taste a hidden trigger, keyed to convoy heat signatures rising past a threshold. They plan to claim we accelerated first. Can we stay under it? Yeah, but that will cost time. We will scrape paint on the gate's Laurent edge if we do. Scraped paint is cheaper than blood. Stay under it," I said. "We'll take scratches." I thought of the cook's pan, the medic's hands, a child pressing a palm to humming steel. "Jun, talk to the fuel brick. Give them the truth." Reyes opened a side channel. "Fuel brick, this is Calder's XO. We're about to run you lean and low. You will want to help us by accelerating to keep formation. Do not. Treat your throttle like a gentleman treats a borrowed glass." A voice came back hoarse and game. "Copy. My throttle is a borrowed glass. I'll sip air." The corridor's mirror lattice steadied. Sextant whispered numbers across my skin. A braid of phase shifts and delays, gentle as a lullaby. The scent of coolant added a clean note to the room, as if someone had wiped the stars with alcohol. Vale breathed out and said, "Now or never. Their left is drunk on our weather." "Now," I said, "we breathe in fear and exhale instruction." Our escort knife punched the air with a sensor bloom that pretended to be a trio of idiots. The fake idiots, the crew called them the choir when they felt kind, and the goats when they did not sing a bright off-key chord. The wedge's left toe slid to stomp on that noise and stepped neatly into our mesh. Sexton dimmed our signatures along the right and tilted reflected traffic just enough to suggest an opening path that was not real until the instant our lead freighter put her nose across it. Idris. I said, open the convoy channel. Make it plain. Convoy. This is Admiral Cade, I said, my voice rolling across 17 bridges and 100 rooms where meals cooled and prayers adjusted themselves to fit air. You will hold your accelerations until you see 3 bright blinks from Calder's dorsal. When you see them, you will burn as if your grandmother's house sits on the other side of the gate. If you cannot burn, you will drift and we will fetch you. If you are afraid, place your palm to the wall and listen. The ship will keep time for you. A murmur from Lifted Grain's galley laced the return traffic, a chorus of shallow breaths. The timer said 13 minutes, 50 seconds. I lifted my hand, pressed 3 toggles. Calder blinked bright, paused, blinked again, then held a breath and gave the third like a blessing. The convoy engines answered in staggered harmony, not too eager, not late. Knife's fake choir shouted louder to hide the real music. Praetor Talon cut back to our open channel, calm, cracking in a hairline way that only men like him hear in themselves. You have elected aggression, he said. Schedules demand closure. His riders poured down to eat our phantom idiots, which faded on cue and left them gnawing vacuum. Our right side knot throat unrolled into a corridor that was only real because we believed it could be, and because Sexton's lattice fed their sensors, a story that made our path look like the safe thing to ignore. Your numbers are only good if your heart can read them. Contact's veil snapped. A micro-mined seam along the Laurent edge, dead center at our exit. So they lined the lip, Reyes said. Of course they did. Sexton hummed. They lined the lip, but cheaply. Off-the-shelf grains. We can comb them with a low-pressure pulse if we accept scorch marks on our hull. How many marks? I asked. 27 small kisses. Sexton said, humor thin but real. On Calder only. Convoy rides behind our wake. Kisses on armor count less than names on marble. Do it. I said, give us a comb. Calder shuddered as a field unrolled from her prow like a net. The net whispered across the seam and set the grains to smoldering. An abacus of tiny suns. A burnt metal tang crept through the vents. The hull sang back, thrum deepening, as if happy to be useful. Talon's voice went thunder flat. Escalation noted. 10 minutes. This corridor closes. Not your corridor, I said, and cut the line. A junior tech stumbled on the lower level, caught themselves on a rail, and laughed, head shaking, which made 3 other techs grin without looking up. Those little unwritten things kept ships from turning into nervous machines. Idris hissed softly. Praetor is prepping a narrative packet. He'll stamp it with scoring that says we broke schedule. I can get to the packet's margins, but not the seal itself. Let him try. I said, Sextant, log our traffic. Public hash it, and stream it to the civic boards on Meridian as we move. If the Praetor wants a story, we'll give them timestamps and heat curves. We write with numbers so lies run out of breath. The convoy slid forward in that careful, dignified way that made me fall in love with their ugly lines. Calder's field brushed 2 more cheap grains into harmless sparks. Vale murmured, Rider wing on the left is waking up from the hangover. They're angry. I can feel it in the sloppy vectors. Stir their anger. I said, not enough to make them brilliant. Enough to make them proud. We pushed. The mirrored corridor held like frost on glass, delicate and improbable. But our heat was low and steady, and our chatter made us sound like stilted tourists. Sexton fed me a whisper. Admiral. The Praetor's right toe just adjusted its timing. He noticed 2 milliseconds of drift and is fixing it. Then we have seconds only, I said. Jun, brace for pop on our tail if he snaps the net. Reyes lifted a hand to steady a junior officer's shoulder. The motion was small, human, and landed like a weight on the room. Steady, he said. We've eaten worse. Steady is a weapon if you hold it long enough. We reached the Laurent lip, the mirror lattice, fragile as a lie told for the right reason. Flexed. The convoy's lead freighter eased her square nose over the gate's cold rim. Mercy's wake slid behind her. Lights dim enough to make nurses work by habit. Idris whispered to the Praetor's shadow like a friend at a party. Wrong foot, always in front. The pop came, not from our tail, but from above. Talon cracked his interdiction nets in a strobe, trying to clap the corridor like a book around a moth. Sexton's lattice caught the clap on our left and made it clap twice in the same place. A ghost echo that tricked their nets into mistiming their own grip. Riders dove in frustration and clawed at phantoms that looked deliciously incompetent. Now we're writing, Vale said, joyless and precise, as if she were finally allowed to use the pen she'd kept capped for days. A scraping judder rattled Calder's bones and left a chalk taste in our mouths. That's the comb, Sexton said. Holkiss, 18 of 27. Paint is crying. Armor amused. Are we clear? I asked. First, 2 freighters across. Sexton said. Third at the lip. We need 31 more seconds before the corridor's phantom stops being persuasive. 31 seconds is a country if you build it. Build it, I said. Idris, flood the boards with our live ledger. Bandwidth be damned. Already drowning them, he said. Public comments open. Someone named Doc Auntie says she likes our blink rhythm. Tell Doc Auntie she can write the songbook later, Reyes muttered, and for a moment the bridge felt like a kitchen again. The Praetor returned. Unbothered mask now cracked enough for anyone watching to see. You're accruing penalties, he said. You will tabulate debts and lives. Debts can be returned, I said, and glanced at the timer. 8 minutes. 4 seconds. Lives cannot. Your scorecard means nothing to a mother holding a blanket. Something shifted in Sexton's tone. A new chord under the old Admiral say, it said. A second wedge is ghosting in on a deep plane below the gate rim. That is unexpected. Not by strength, but by posture. It's a reserve meant to arrive only if doctrine fails. So they brought an umbrella to throw shade on us if their sun went behind a cloud. Reyes said. Vale's breath tightened. If they bring it up now, it can sweep the tail of the convoy. We'll lose our rhythm. They won't destroy us. They'll make us flail. That's worse on public record. Agreed. I said. I felt the hull's slow heartbeat through my boots. Sextant. Can we make the reserve wedge choose between 2 last offers? Perhaps. Sextant said, and for the first time there was something like hunger in its music. If we project a phantom convoy retreating along a lower corridor while pushing the real one through the upper, their reserve must decide which truth to bless with attention. Their doctrine can't allow both. Do it, I said. Make them polite to the wrong guests. Politeness is a trap if you build the party right. Idra, I added. Seed a rumor on their internal bands that we've folded 2 convoys, one of them humanitarian special. Use their slang for it. White ribbon. Idris said, "I'm already typing." I'll misspell it, so their sensors think it's from one of their own. Sexton spun the lattice into a larger web, a thin, shimmering thing that made my skin feel like paper near a candle. The room's air cooled. The smell of ozone got sharp, as if someone had snapped a towel in a sauna. Our boards flickered, not from failure, but from 1,000 tiny choices blooming at once. The reserve wedge hesitated, then tilted toward the lower phantom with dutiful grace. In my jaw, I felt the heavy relief of a gear engaging. "Admiral," Sexton said, "bright now. This will hold for 60 seconds if we do not gloat." "We never gloat," I said, because I was a liar when it kept children alive. "We do not cheer in the hallway while the house is still burning." The convoy's middle third skimmed the Laurent lip. Calder took hull kiss number 24 and wore it like a bruise on a knee after a good day's work. In the medbay, a nurse cursed softly at a coffee cup that slid unexpectedly and then caught it with 2 fingers without looking. Another civilian vignette flashed up unasked. A gardener aboard the hospital barge, bent over a narrow bed of herbs in a little greenhouse that recycled breath into grace. She pinched a stem and said, "Mint's tough. It likes being pinched. You'd think kindness is soft, but ask mint what it does when pressed." She lifted a leaf and ran it under her nose, eyes closing for a second that felt like a vow. "You'll have tea when this is done." Tea after tear is a valid strategy. 70 meters to clear for the 5th hull, Vale said. "Reserve wedge is getting suspicious." "Let them," I said, and felt the vibration of our pumps through the rail. My breath tasted like tin. The timer said 6 minutes. 12 seconds. Sextant. "Mark their timing skew again." Adjusted. Sextant said, "Their doctrine is tightening. They are shifting from schedule to wrath. That is good for us and bad for their future." "Speak that out loud," I said, so the room could hear. Sexton obliged. Voice carrying. "The ultimatum doctrine works only when the crowd believes the clock is God. When the clock falters, doctrine turns to anger, and anger is terrible at arithmetic. Arrogance is a math error with a uniform." The convoy's tail, 3 freighters who swore in 3 different languages and loved the same 2 jokes, drew up. The reserve wedge lifted its nose like a hound tasting rain and made the wrong choice again. Polite to a ghost. Our lattice trembled. Calder hummed her song into my bones. A sharp cry lanced from the lower deck. "Not fear pain." I looked to see a tech shaking his hand, glove smoldering. Reyes was already moving, grabbing a burned kit from the wall and cracking a cold pack with a violence that made the pack gasp. "You show me blisters after," he said, wrapping the tech's palm, voice calm enough to tame dust. "Right now, you are the left hand of a very stubborn idea. Cost 1 palm blistered, 2 hours lost to dressing, no loss of will." We cleared the lip. Sexton released a breath I could feel. Upper convoy across, lower phantom dissolving. Reserve wedge correcting too late to bite. "Idris," I said, "package a mid-action public brief. Include our 3 blink signal, the net clap error, the hull comb. Make it so a school class can replay this without us in the room." "On it," he said, his mouth quirking. "Doc Auntie is going to have a day." Sarah Vale leaned into her harness and exhaled a smile she didn't notice she had. "We're not done," she said, because she was incapable of letting victory arrive unchaperoned. "No," I agreed. "We're not. We cross early to learn what the late will suffer." The praetor's face returned. orderly fury making his pupils small. "This breach is recorded," he said. 6 minutes remain. You will stand down or be punished. The Count does not forgive." "The Count forgives nothing," I said. "People do." He cut the line like a man who doesn't want to hear his own heart. Sexton began to clear the lattice, stripping it to threads so thin they might have been missed. The corridor felt colder without the deception singing. Our palms warmed, then smoothed. The scent in the room shifted to hot plastic and worn cloth, the honest aftermath of a sprint. "Next set," Reyes said, eyes on the map. "We still have to unmake their doctrine in public, not just outrun it." "I know," I said. "We showed the mirror. Now we write their cost." "Admiral," Sexton said, tone turning contemplative. "Their legal pack, queued for after action, has a clause I have not seen in open doctrine. A return clause that permits retroactive justification of force if they can show a harm delta beyond a threshold. They plan to point at the reserve wedge's late correction and label it our provocation." "How public is that clause?" I asked. "Shrouded," Sexton said. "But the seal is sloppy. We can peel it, if we're willing to show our method." "Show it," I said. "We trade a trick for a truth. We spend cleverness to buy transparency." Sexton pulsed a formal channel to the civic boards and the Accord's own oversight nodes, attaching the peeled clause with our heat curves and time stamps and the gardener's piece of mint like a ribbon down a rifle barrel. Idris laced the packet with a simple primer what we did, why we did it, the choices we left open that Talon tried to slam shut, the minds we brushed aside by spending paint and not lives. Vale's board pinged a new pattern. "Praetor is moving his flagship," she said. "He's going to place himself between our tail and the gate exit. He wants to picture his seal and our delayed freighter in the same frame." "And then the system scale trap," Reyes said. "Mouth align. You see it. I saw it. The Meridian system had 2 exits, twinned, like doors that a polite host opens while intending to lock one and slam the other. Talon wanted us to run for the east exit, where his nets would fold like a book. He'll make the corridor open and then perform closure as a mercy. I said, on record, he guided us. "Unless we turn the book inside out," Vale said, eyes bright. "Unless we turn his inside out," I agreed. "Do not let the author title your chapter for you." Before the next push, Sexton fed me one more civilian breath. On the fuel brick, the captain sat with a hand around his throttle, not touching it, just holding the air near it as if the air were a glass he'd promised not to smudge. He spoke to no one in particular. "I want to be the kind of man who can sit still when stillness is asked," he said. "I have not always been that man. Today I practice." His thumb pressed to the console's wooden inlay, a relic from the brick's first captain who had believed ships behave better if they have something human to touch. Practice is bravery without a band playing. "Admiral," Sexton said, "if we seed a phantom over the east exit and bleed heat into the west, while our signal grammar says we are afraid of the west, the Praetor's doctrine will steer him to save us from our fear and pull the trap where there is no prey. And we bear his schedule," I said. He closes his hand on air while the ledger marks time. "The ledger loves time," Sexton said, almost fond. "This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Make it so." I said, "Idris, prepare 3 sentences for the public feed when we flip him. Keep it simple enough for a child to explain to a judge." "He said the door was safe," Idris murmured, already typing. "We showed both doors. He chose the wrong one. He closed it anyway. We don't argue with threats. We make them work for us." The system-scale maps spread across our dome, stars like grains of salt on slate. The east exit warmed with our phantom fear. The west cooled until it looked like a bad idea we were desperate enough to try. Talon's flagship, priest of a crueltied schedule, sailed to make his sermon visible. Sexton's voice thinned. Brace now. The flip requires us to burn our deception budget early. We won't have mirror money later. We'll spend steel then, I said. June. Alert decks for micro impacts. Seri. If I fall, you finish the lesson. You won't fall, Vale said, with the stubborn respect of a junior promising a senior's bones a season more. The flip landed like turning a coat inside out in one motion, lining snagging on a ring. Our phantom fear became a hand waving, our real path cooled like a held breath. Talon's nets unfurled at the east. Perfect geometry present to 100 cameras. He closed on the absence he had been trained to bless. Doctrine, without doubt, loves an empty throne. Public pack it away, Idris said, grin thin as wire. Civic boards are already stamping the return clause in amber. Their own seal is on the wrong page. Hull Kiss 27, Sexton said, almost cheerful. We have completed our comb. Calder is scuffed and dignified. We entered the west corridor in a column neat enough to pass inspection. Talon's flagship tensed and, for the first time, hesitated in sight of a crowd. We had forced him to choose between looking foolish and being cruel on record. Doctrine hated that choice. Admiral, Sexton said quietly, he may fire a single demonstrative shot across our stern to assert control. It will be a bruise, not a wound, if we angle correctly. Angle, I said. I prefer bruises. A beam strode past our tail, hot enough to make sweat jump. The shock hit like a train kissing a wall and left our decks ringing. A bell that remembered it was bronze. 2 crew went down to knees. One with a curse. One with a laugh that sounded like a sob's older cousin. Cost synced panels on deck 5. 2 crew with minor concussions. Pride smudged but intact. Idris wheeled to me with eyes bright. Public sees the beam. The comment feed is teaching itself. A dock worker wrote, "You don't hurt a bandage." Pin that, I said, because sometimes the public wrote better than we did under fire. The timer hit 2 minutes, 10 seconds. We slid, elegant now, because we had made enough right choices to look graceful. Talon's flag still hesitated, caught between closing a door and pretending doors were not his to close. Sexton's lattice, stripped to a whisper, kept the eyes of his oversight on him like cool hands on his back. We keep our foes honest by inviting their bosses to watch. Admiral Vele said, voice very calm, your heart, please. My heart is right where I left it. I said, nussed dry as the room. Sextant. Count us down to the West Exo threshold. 104 seconds. Sexton said, heat on Mercy's wake rising and then easing. Fuel brick holding its gentleman's glass. Knife angling its profile to look larger so their riders feel satisfied without killing anything. Good knives know when to look like swords, Reyes muttered. We passed the point where we would have to commit to a sprint or be scissored by a late net. I chose the sprint, not because I yearned for speed, but because the ledger asked for clean lines in the replay. 3 bright blink again, I said. And Calder flashed like an old lighthouse guiding a small town's hopes. He fired again, petty and accurate. The beam licked our paint and cut a groove in our pride that felt like it would itch later. The hull sang louder, a note that ended in something like a chuckle. Pain is a note. We refuse to make it a chord. We crossed the threshold. The system beyond opened like a room where the lights were already on. The convoy fanned, breaths sinking to a rhythm that ships learn from the captains who refuse to pretend that fear is weakness. Sexton's tone softened, as if tiredness were allowed now. We are through. We are not safe. We are seen. Good, I said, and let my shoulders drop a fraction. Talon's face appeared again, smaller now, as if shame had learned to scale video. You will be pursued, he said. Records will show your disregard. Our records show your doctrine stumbled, I said. We will be filing. He closed the line because he had to. Doctrine has no room for conversation when conversation writes a ledger. Write it down so the next child doesn't have to. We rode the quiet for 6 heartbeats. The pumps purred. The vents exhaled air with a hint of mint because someone on Mercy's wake had crushed a leaf in their glove and then touched a filter with a kind of defiance that recipes sometimes require. Admiral, Sexton said, already building again. The Praetor will set a system-scale trap at the next node. The classic Carter turned inside out. He will make it look like an open escort and then perform a kill box where the public cannot easily see walls turning. We will have to force the view wider. We'll carry the mirror arrays external, I said, thinking of the lattice's spent budget and our scratched paint. Mount them on the convoy hulls like lanterns. Make the trap visible at the angles he cannot control. That will increase risk. Sexton said, lanterns can be broken. Then we hold them high. I looked at Reyes, who nodded like a man who had read the same page all his life and still found new sentences. Hold the light where it can be criticized and copied. Before we move, I said, feed me the freighter galley. The cook had her pan off the heat, sleeves pushed up, forearms shiny with steam. She tapped the spoon on the pan's lip and said, small now, small later. We said, now you can take one more bite. If your hands are shaking less, it means the good ones did their work and the bad ones are going to have a long meeting about it. She smiled without showing teeth and added, mint tea in 10. Reyes chuckled despite himself. Vale looked like she was discovering she could smile in a war without falling into sentimentality. Idris wiped his brow with the back of his wrist and turned back to flood the boards with a summary a child could read to a judge. Set the lanterns, I said. Sextant, map me a corridor we can flip inside out on a stage big enough that Talon can't claim darkness, and teach me his next number before he thinks it. Learn them so you can make them learn. Sextant's answer thrummed through the frame. A music box winding tight. Course plotted. Lantern mounts assigned. Heat budgets calculated with room for fear. The next node is a theater. He will speak. We will show. Prepare to anchor the convoy through a polite invitation that is actually a mouth. I nodded, feeling the old shift inside that comes when restraint chooses a sharper edge. The mint in the air felt like permission. The hulls hum like a spine checking itself for cracks. We had crossed the first door by making the threat write its cost in a public hand. Now we would make the doctrine count the price of its performance under bright lights. Anchor your people, then unbutton the lie. We set the lanterns on freighter flanks like festival lights that had survived a bad season. Engineers in mag boots walked Calder's belly and locked mounts with a pneumatic clack that rattled up through the ribs and back down again. Each lantern was a shallow dish of reflective plates and modest emitters, tuned to make fields visible to civilian optics. They were ugly in a good way, born for function, not applause. The room's air smelled of hot epoxy and stale coffee as techs rushed calibration, and fingers black with sealant made careful work on delicate filaments. Say it simple so a door guard can nod. Before we burned for the next node, I asked Sexton for another ordinary breath. The fleet mind obliged with a window into a laundry space aboard the hospital barge. 2 orderlies stood elbow to elbow at a folding bench, steam from a cracked dryer gasket painting their cheeks. One was humming. The other folded blankets with a precision that made the wrinkled world feel tame. "Corners kiss first," she said, laying wool to wool. Then the long side listens. Then the short side sighs. The hum rose into words. "If we get 3 more, we can make a dragon out of them." A third voice from off-screen said, "A dragon is a heat hazard." And they laughed without stopping their hands. "A calm task gives fear a place to sleep." "Course plotted," Sexton said, overlaying the theater of the next node across our dome so clean my eyes misted. "Praetor Talon has issued an escort corridor to the East Rim. Language is rich with paternal kindness. He intends to corral us gently, then squeeze when the cameras become bored." "Oh, let's forbid boredom," Reyes said, rolling his shoulders like he could oil the universe by example. The deck purred underfoot as pumps hit a new cadence. Somewhere close, a coolant fan ticked as if counting small prayers. "Idris," I said, "prepare an audience. Civic boards, local port cameras, any vessel with a dish and a child with a question. Text overlays, big font. Make the trap walls visible with our lantern returns. Label his edges with their names." "Captions ready," Idris replied. "I'll give the public a ruler and a crayon. Give them tools and they build their own verdict." We pushed, restrained and bright. The lantern plates shimmered in low power, turning invisible geometry into a haze the color of moonlit breath. The hull carried a faint heat that smelled like solder, and the bridge's lights dimmed to keep our eyes honest. Vale's hands were flat on her board, fingers barely moving, as if she guided larger muscles in some machine no one had invented yet. "Praetor on," Idris said. Talon's face arrived again, lit like a man who had never tasted a burned tongue. "Admiral Cade," he said. "Patient now. Almost indulgent. We will escort you. Cameras will record your compliance. There will be no harm if you accept guided order. You may keep your lights on. Transparency is welcome." "Transparency is correct," I said, letting my voice be flat as a plate. "We will escort ourselves. Your walls are visible." He showed a smile that learned its shape in a mirror. "Walls are metaphors. Admiral, we offer lanes. Beware the man who calls a wall a lane." Sexton fed me a private stream, thermal signatures in slow bloom, micropulses along the east rim shaping his gentle bookfold. The lanterns answered with a silver haze that made the fold obvious to any citizen watching with a cracked tablet in a dock bar. Idris overlaid big letters. "This edge pushes. That edge pulls. Door hides here." "Admiral," Sexton said softly. "His doctrine requires him to keep the fold very near the cameras, but not on top of them. If we force the angle wide, his own broadcast will reveal the pinch. He will pretend it is guidance. Then we give the crowd a new seat," I said. "Sirrah, drift our lanterns up plane 8 microdegrees so civilians catch a shallow glare off his fields." "Jun, prepare a 2-step burn. The first will look like we're spooked by the West. The second goes west with bookish confidence." "I like books," Reyes said. "They keep time better than clocks when men like him hold the hands." A kettle alarmed on a forgotten shelf behind Idris, an old tin thing with a whistling lip that someone had kept for luck. He slapped it off with a grin that betrayed he liked the sound. "Make room for luck, but don't depend on it." The escort corridor opened on the east like a grin. Our lanterns made the teeth show. Civilians on the portboards began to draw circles in the shared common space, children marking where the push would happen because they had learned about fingers and clay. Sexton chuckled in the bones of the ship. Doc Ante says the fold looks like a bad seam. Doc Ante is an admiral, I said, and meant it. We performed the first burn like cowards who had read enough history to know how to kneel in public. Our heat dipped toward the west. Heads turning, cameras eager. Talon's corridor flared its benevolence. Second burn, I said, and the column leaned to the west like choir boys leaving a procession for cake. The lanterns lit hard, and the trap's edges blazed into common sight. Idris punched captions on our own feed and mirrored them onto his if. This is love. Why are your hands so tight? Kind questions can corner a cruel doctrine. Talon stiffened. You are courting collision, he said. We are preventing it. Your prevention is a grip. I said. Public. Mark the pressure rise where his guardrails narrow. Sexton widened the stage. The pressure rise became a bright bruise on the map, and citizens drew fingers across it in unison. A stevedore wrote that pinch will crack a hole like a walnut if a pilot looks left at the wrong second. The feed captured his thumbs and his chipped nail, authenticity better than any seal. We trust hands that show their scars. Lantern 3 is running hot, Vale announced, nostrils flaring as if she could smell the ceramic cooking through vacuum. If we keep this angle, we'll pop plates. Pop them, I said. The pop is a line on a ledger, and the ledger is a stage. Cost Lantern 3 blown. Shards like glass petals. No hull breach. Camera catches the spark with children watching. The spark became a symbol. The vigil window showed the laundry crew pausing, steam beating on lips. One blanket held between 4 fingers as if care itself could hold a ship together. Corner's kiss. The folder murmured. More prayer than instruction. Talon shifted doctrine in real time. An ugly thing made visible. We are calling a hold, he announced, voice wearing virtue like armor. Stand down. Cease thrust. We will reconfigure the lane. He tried to make his pause mercy. Sexton slid a whispered note into my cochlear. The reconfiguration deepened the pinch at a different angle. Out of the primary camera arcs. He would look benevolent while the squeeze moved to a blind. Idris, I said. Commandeer a fishing hull's helmet cam from the east crowd. Pointed at the blind. Old man cow with a boat is about to be famous. Idris said, grinning. He says he'll do it if we promise the convoy whistles when they pass him. We'll whistle, I said. Though ships cannot whistle. Sextant. Transmit a harmonic for him. We cut to Cow's feed a salt and iron face in a cracked visor. Breath fogging and clearing. Glove wiping the lens with a tenderness that could teach the galaxy to behave. He panned. The blind burnt into view. The reconfigured lane was a mouth at a new angle. Show them the shadow and the teeth can't lie. Talon's poise frayed. You are manufacturing panic, he said. We have procedures. Procedures do not absolve intent. I said, quiet like a line for a tribunal. Public. Watch how harmonics stack here. Idris overlaid a diagram so simple a child could make it with cups on a table. Citizens copied the demonstration with bowls and boxes and filmed themselves. Doc Ante hammered a ladle on a rail. The shared feed sounded like a kitchen becoming a choir. Reyes leaned in. Whisper harsh. He will give up the escort posture and go to command by fire if he thinks we have taken the stage. We need to choose whether to accept a shot to keep him in view or sprint and risk him claiming abandonment. We stay, I said. and felt something settle in my chest like a coin choosing a side. We stay, and we let him draw blood where the camera can see. Stay in the light even when it stings. Brace, Sexton said. Demonstrative beam inbound. We can bleed it along the lanterns, but there will be arcing. Arcing is honest, Vale said. The beam touched the lantern chain like a finger dragging across a harp, and sparks sang in a long hiss that made my molars ache. Ozone flooded the vents. Plastic smoked. A console's corner fizzed and died. A junior screamed, then clamped a hand on their own mouth as if to catch the sound. Reyes was on that fire with a blanket in 2 strides, smothering without ceremony. Eyes, he said, throwing a mask at the tech, voice like river rock. Cost 1 board fried, 2 lanterns lost, 1 tech with singed hair and a story to tell. Public sees it clean, Idris said, coughing once and laughing once, because sometimes those were twins. Cow with a boat whispered, ugly music, and 1,000 people typed ugly music at once. Keep them typing, I said. Sextant, announce a public inquiry schedule and deliver initial packets now. Quote their return clause and stamp it with our timestamps. Delivered. Sexton replied, oversight nodes have acknowledged. The Praetor cannot delete what 1,000 grannies have already downloaded. Grannies with archives are a strategic asset. We slid the column through the west with our lantern singing weak but honest. Talon's escort dissolved from benevolence to brittle orders, and then to something worse, a sudden silence that meant a man had to decide whether to lash out or step back. Doctrine hates stepping back. Sexton's tone turned clinical. He chooses strike, low-yield area denial pattern. He will justify it as safety by partition. Partition this, Vale muttered, angling Knife's profile to look delicious and incompetent. The denial pattern blossomed into nowhere. Our lanterns and Cow's camera caught it. Idris stamped it. He closed a door on empty air and called it care. Make the world laugh and a tyrant loses grip. He fired for real, then small and mean. At Knife's fake error, the shot kissed Knife's shield and skittered in sparks, like stars falling sideways. Alarms croaked in 3 different key signatures. The hull thumped twice. A dog shaking off rain. Knife reports shield bruise. Vale said, they want permission to snarl. Deny, I said. Feed them a grin instead. Let their grin look better in review. Knife grinned a shallow roll that presented a hunter's shoulder and departed with exaggerated politeness. The public chat exploded with children drawing knives that smiled and then went to school. We leave them with a joke and a record. By the time the corridor thinned into honest black, the escort performance had inverted itself for all to see. We had spent deception coins and steel coins and maybe too many breath coins, but the ledger glowed in public light. Sexton's voice warmed. Inquiry nodes propose a live session in 30 minutes. They want the Praetor present, his council present, our packages, and Cow's camera present, except on our behalf, I said. Offer him every right he offers his prey, and send Doc Auntie a badge. Doc Auntie immediately changed her handle to Doc Auntie, Badge Edition, and promised to bake a cake no matter what men with seals said about sugar budgets. Idris put her in a corner of the public screen like a saint icon, and the crowd behaved a little better because she could see them. Bake cakes and file evidence. We took stock. Calder's paint was scratched with 27 honest marks. Lantern chains were missing 2 teeth and singing in 2 keys at once. The fuel brick held its gentleman's glass, and its captain whispered thank yous to a wooden inlay as if wood could hear through vacuum. Mercy's wake reported minor tremors in 2 wards, and a nurse who had caught a sliding cup in flight with a hand that would tell the story grander later. Escalation 2. Reyes said, "Not smiling now. He will not let this stand. He will build a doctrine defense at system scale emergency doctrine. He'll claim that our spectacles create emergencies and that his schedule must be absolute in emergency, not public. He'll try to pull us into a quiet corner. Then we build a bigger corner." I said, "Sextant, open our beam to the Accord's central board and the Meridian Port Authority, both. Invite a panel of random citizens, like a jury, to observe the inquiry in real time with the right to ask questions at set intervals." Done. Sextant said, "Randomization seeded by Doc Auntie's cake recipe, so nobody can argue later." "Of course," I said, and slid my palms along the cool rail, feeling the low shiver of recycled air racing through ribs. "Idris, write me words for a mother and words for a mathematician. We'll need both. Speak 2 languages or build 2 bridges." We arrived at the inquiry like a convoy arrives at a holiday after a storm. Civilians appeared in their windows, framed by plants and towels and tools. Cow with a boat sat in a chair that creaked. Doc Auntie had a cake in a tin and a frown that could hold a dock together. Eminent persons from the Accord wore sober shirts and brought pens that had offended no one. Praetor Talon appeared with counsel and a seal, the last uncracked thing about him. He looked smaller with the lantern light behind him, as if utility were a crown he could not wear. "Proceed," he said. "Crisp." "Proceed," said Oversight Chair Lemmy, a person with a voice like a well-tuned bell. "Admiral Cade, begin with your 3-blink signal." I began. Sexton projected graphs and curves that did not shout. Idris wrote captions teachers could clip into homework. Vale sat statuesque, every muscle on hand to be disciplined, and Reyes's fingers tapped the rail like a metronome. The hull hummed. A vent coughed. Someone far away dropped a wrench, and the sound traveled through 16 cameras and made strange fellowship. Don't embarrass them. Instruct them until they embarrass themselves. Talon's counsel spoke control smoothly. Smooth until Cow cleared his throat and asked the first citizen's question. "When you said reconfigure, what did you mean?" "Exactly. Because my lens saw your walls move behind my back." "Reconfiguration is standard safety practice," counsel said. "We adapt too. Safety practice does not hide from cameras." Doc Auntie said, not waiting her turn and earning 100 hearts. If a baker moves a rack, she tells the child not to stand behind it. You did not tell the child. You moved the rack on the child. Audiences can turn courts into classrooms. We walk them through the return clause, through the escort pinch, through the denial bloom that hugged nothing. Sextant peeled with gentle fingers. Idris labeled with polite arrows. Cow frowned in his chair and, once, smirked. The praetor tried to claim schedule, but the schedule had been made ugly by his use. Lemmy the chair asked him whether his mercy ended when a camera was placed at a new angle. He said the word contingent, and the room changed temperature. Doctrine that must avoid angles to appear kind is not doctrine, I said, as if reminding a nephew not to snatch. It's theater. The price of theater cannot be charged to freighters. Price should be paid by the ticket taker, not the audience. Reyes read the cost list with Soldier Clean 2 concussions, 1 blister, 2 lanterns, 27 paint scours, 3 cups saved by reflex. He ended with the mint leaf, recorded by Mercy's gardener, and the sound of a ship's venting saving the smell of tea. Sexton titled a final slide what we did instead of shooting. With 5 bullets, no one argued with "Don't let doctrine define safety," "Record while hot," "Spend paint to save blood," "Show walls," "Don't brag about hammers," "Let grannies archive." Lemmy nodded once. "Praetor Talon," she said. "Do you have anything simple to say?" He chose a trap and fell in. Civilians should not be involved in military corridors. Civilians are the corridor, Doc Auntie said, and set her cake on her lap like a shield. Let them say the quiet part loud in front of cake. The board recessed for 9 minutes. Our hull hummed. The pumps ticked. Idris took a sip from a bottle that had forgotten it was water and coughed like a man who'd kissed smoke too often. Vale closed her eyes for exactly 30 seconds, then opened them and placed her hands back the way she had found them. Reyes adjusted a strap and scanned a list as if looking at it could keep it honest. They returned with precedent in their hands. Lemmy's voice carried the weight without breaking. By authority of the Meridian Oversight, and with concurrence from the Accord's Central Board, the Ultimatum Doctrine as applied to civilian corridors is hereby suspended pending rulemaking. Schedules cannot coerce consent. Escort lanes require dual-party angle control and public archiving. Return clauses cannot wash blood when stagecraft is used to manufacture blame. These rules are effective now. Write law while the smell of ozone still lives in the air. Talon did not bow. Doctrine taught him to stiffen at the wrong times. But his flag shifted posture in 40 ships, the way a choir stiffens when asked for a song they do not like. An aide behind him swallowed audibly, and 2 riders pulled back from positions they should not have held. He could still run. He could still strike away from cameras and claim local exception. He could still tuck us in under a new word. We were not finished, Admiral Sexton said in the private rhythm of the bones. A subset of his command is preparing a severability demonstration near the North Debris Span, a micro-battle to show that emergency remains their purview. They will prove our restraint creates hazards. Then we go where the proof is. I said, we go. We bring lanterns. We bring cow. And we bring Doc Auntie. Jun, prepare a high drift insertion. Sarah, take knife and 2 more to make 3 idiots that are honest about being brave. Idris, prepare captions when someone says emergency. Ask who benefits. Ask who profits from the fire drill. Before we burned, I asked for an ordinary breath. Sexton gave me a corner of a bunk room on lifted grain. A mechanic lay on his back, wrench on his chest, staring at the upper bunk's underplank where someone had carved a crude heart and 2 initials. He touched the heart with 1 grease-black finger and murmured, "We'll sand this later. It's a splinter." Then he smiled at his own foolishness and got up to work. Small maintenance keeps large courage affordable. We arrived skirts first to the debris span, where old hull sections turned slowly in the thin light, and Talon's subset was already painting the void with a narrative of rescue gone wrong. We lit lanterns and turned their performance into a map a child could reduce to chalk. Knife rolled to show her honest shoulder again. The denial pattern shaped. Idris typed as fast as he had ever typed in his life, and the captions crawled along our screens and theirs like helpful ants. "Admiral," Vale said, not looking away, "if we run the mirror strips along the debris, we can make their safety bloom, reflect, and show the squeeze. We have enough lattice left for a few seconds of good hard teaching. Do it," I said. "Spend the last of our clever coins." The span lit, bright as a market at midday. Beams bounced across broken plates and returned to their owners with a message, "We see you." A rider who had loved his doctrine without questioning it flinched, then steadied and eased his throttle. That was the first open change. The second was smaller, but louder, a child's voice in the public chat saying, "That looks bad." And a chorus of adults responding, "Yes." And now we all see it. Do not shame them. Give them a way out in public. Talon pushed one last time. A narrow beam lanced for Knife's lantern grid. Precise and angry, Knife did not flinch. Her field greeted it by bending like a reed and letting it waste into brightness. Sparks sprayed. A hiss filled our vents, and the bridge smelled of metal teeth. Cost one lantern string sacrificed to write a sentence a million eyes could read. Oversight chair, Lemmy's icon appeared in the corner. An eyebrow the size of a rule. "Praetor," she said, "emergency cannot be invoked to hide a grip. Stand down. Teach your officers better schedules. Begin with the sentence, 'Civilians are the corridor.'" Talon closed his eyes. When he opened them, humanity had not won the universe. We had won a handhold. "Admiral Cade," he said, the seal on his chest dull as pewter in our lantern light. "Your methods are performative. They are legible," I said. "Legibility saves small lives because it changes big habits." He stood down, not by kneeling, not by apologizing in poetry, but by moving 3 ships and unspeaking 2 orders. The subset backed off the debris span. Knife rolled upright and stopped trying to look like a sword. The convoy held lane like people who had peeled a storm and found sky under it. We stayed long enough to turn the theater into procedure. Idris uploaded templates how to mount lanterns with scrap plates, how to blink 3 long whenever walls move, how to chalk a household bowl demonstration onto a dockyard wall, how to write an inquiry request in 10 sentences that a grandmother could memorize. Doc Auntie presented her cake and said she would share only with people who promised to archive the session. She ran out of cake faster than she expected and smiled like a woman who had watched a child learn to tie a knot. Sexton whispered the line we needed for later. By accord writ, these rules enter the books now. It said, "Our ledger is no longer just a habit. It's a statute. Write it while hands still smell of soap and smoke." We escorted ourselves to the Meridian Orbital like a parade of ugly vessels with honest souls. The pumps ticked cool. The vents exhaled air with a fresh cloth scent because someone on Mercy's wake had tucked lavender near a filter. Alarms dimmed and went to sleep. The hull's hum lightened like a chest loosening after stubborn coughing. The civilian vignettes kept coming not because we needed more proof, but because a fleet is made of mouths that tell each other who they are. The gardener snipped mint and laughed. The laundry folder taught a teenager to forgive corners. Cow with a boat held up a thermos and said the tea tasted like a story he'd get to tell 3 times, and no one would groan. The fuel brick captain finally touched the throttle with 2 fingers and murmured. Glass returned unchipped to the wood. At the dock, a child pressed a palm to Calder's scuffed paint. The bruise was warm. She looked up at her mother, and her mother nodded without words. Idris captured that frame and sent it to the public feed with no caption at all. Silence is also a language when the picture is understandable. Praetor Talon withdrew his wedge outside camera range, where he could consider whether doctrine served him or he served doctrine. I did not wish him epiphanies. I wished him review boards and subordinates who asked inconvenient questions. Those are the kinder teachers. Rhea slumped into a chair for the first time in hours and promptly sat too straight to qualify as slumping. Vale inspected her knuckles for unspecified crimes and found none. Sexton's tone softened into something like the quiet after a good lecture When students pack bags and nobody wants to leave first in case someone asks the one last perfect question. We filed the aftermath. The Accord Board stamped the precedent ultimatum doctrine banned in civilian corridors. Escort lanes require dual-angle control and public archiving. Return clauses cannot be invoked where stagecraft manufactured blame. Doc Auntie received an official title she ignored in favor of the one that fit. Cow with a boat got a new camera gasket mailed in a brown paper full of signatures. I stood beneath the dome and let the hum of the ship play my bones like an instrument that believes its musician. Mint rode the air. Ozone had faded. Warm plastic and clean cloth reminded me that someone had scrubbed. The countdown clock in the corner was gone, replaced by a simple note in Sexton's hand ledger filed, receipts sent, tea steeping. In my head, I spoke to a world that had almost learned the wrong lesson from clocks. We had refused its schedule and offered arithmetic instead. Not perfect. Never perfect. Enough. The bridge dimmed 2 degrees. Someone laughed far down a corridor. A pump sighed. Doc Auntie's cake tin clanged shut like a bell. I spoke not to Talon, not to the boards, but to the hands that touched rails and throttles and cameras and bowls. We changed the story by refusing to let a clock pretend to be a judge. We taught with receipts when fists would have been faster. We let the crowd hold the mirror, then asked them to draw what they saw. We paid in paint and lanterns and 1 blister and 2 concussions because that is the tariff for making danger honest in daylight. Keep the tools near the door. Show your work. Share the tea. On the far edge of the dock, our lantern arrays cooled from white to pewter, their plates fogging with tiny beads that rolled and fell like a good sweat after a hard run. We win by making mercy obvious and math public.